Hey there, Brendan Spilly here from Thirst Gym. And if you're struggling with your hinging or your RDL technique, I'm here to tell you you're not the only person. I work with dozens of athletes every single week, and the most challenging movement for them to grasp is the RDL or proper hinging. Even when it comes to strength athletes, I find that if they're having hip or low back issues, more cases than not, their hinging pattern needs addressed. So this video today is going to be here to help you improve your RDL technique, get the most out of it, and ensure that you're getting optimal glute and hamstring development, but also that the movements that you're creating are genuine and going to last, so that anytime you do any kind of hinging exercise, you're going to be able to do it and get the utmost and most optimal technique and performance out of that hinging motion. Let's go to the RDL. All right, when it comes to performing the barbell RDL, let's talk about some initial setup things. So the first thing I'm going to recommend is that you have the barbell slightly lower than your lockout, so that as you have to go to take it out, you're going to be able to clear the rack nice and easily. So you don't want it too high, but you also don't want to deadlift it out of the rack. The second thing I want to discuss is what's the difference between an RDL and a straight leg deadlift or a stiff leg deadlift. In my opinion, the big difference is a stiff leg deadlift is always going to start from the ground. So if I had plates on here, the barbell would actually start from down here, okay? And I would actually wedge myself into position and stand up from that position, where the RDL is going to start from a top-down approach, and we're essentially always going to start with an eccentric motion first, okay? So if you're deadlifting it from the ground, you're basically doing a stiff leg deadlift. I'll make sure I link my stiff leg deadlift video in the description box below so you can check that out and see how to optimize that movement for you. The next, when it comes to the RDL, is understanding that everybody's hinge pattern is going to be slightly different. It's never going to be a one size fits all because everybody's built a little different. You may have longer arms, you may have better hamstring mobility, you may have different hip structure. It's all going to change the way that your RDL is going to look compared to mine or somebody else's. However, there are going to be general coaching cues we want to make sure we adhere to. And so the first thing that I want to recommend when it comes to the RDL, if you're training your glutes and your hamstrings, and that's what your primary goal is, if you feel that you need to use straps to use the optimal amount of load, then I'm going to say use the straps. If you're doing this to build your deadlift, but grip is an issue, don't use straps. Do these with your bare hands so you can develop some grip strength while you're doing this as an accessory or supplemental based exercise. If you're not in either of those camps and it doesn't matter, do what works best for you. I think it's not really that big of a deal whether you're using double overhand, mixed grip, hook grip, straps. Use what works best for you depending upon what your goals are going to be. Next is going to be, as we go to do this, our feet are going to be lined up with our hips. Our hands are going to be outside of our pockets. At no point are we going to grab it here. We're always going to grab it outside of our pockets. And then we're just going to take 1 to 2 steps back so we got enough room to move. I don't need to be 8 miles away from the rack, okay? I just need to make sure that I've got some space to move. Then from this position, I always want to make sure that my chest is tall. I don't want to particularly try to round. That's going to cause issues later on. I'll talk about that in a second. We want to make sure our chest is proud, our sternum is pushed up, and that I can feel my lats or squeeze my armpits gently. It doesn't have to be an extension like this, okay? We just want to make sure that we're tall and proud. I should be able to push my chest out slightly. Next step's going to be to bend our knees or slightly unlock them. Okay, so we don't want to have our knees completely locked out. That's going to cause us to have to really try to create some space here, and the barbell is going to drift out in front of me, and I'm going to basically not be able to hinge from this position. So I want my knees nice and soft, chest is tall, and then my first motion is going to be my butt is going to go back towards the wall. Always butt back. You don't want to extend and then butt go back. We want to just make sure everything stays nice and stacked. Hips are going to go back, bar is going to slide down my thighs. As the bar is sliding down my thighs, my head is going to follow. I don't want to keep my neck craned, okay? I also don't want to look straight down. I just want to find a nice focal object right there in front of me. So I'm going to look at that dumbbell that's sticking out on the turf for me right now. Knees are soft, hips go back. Bar is going to come back until I get slightly below my knees, and then I'm going to come back up. So notice that I'm not going too crazy far low, but I'm also making sure that my whole foot is in contact with the ground. I'm not rolling to my sides. I'm not feeling the sides of my feet. I actually want to feel the inside part of my feet. Inside part of my feet are going to help me hinge backwards and get a more optimal position. I'm getting just below the knees because that's all that my mobility allows me. Then I would come back into the rack. Next thing I'm really going to recommend here is if you're really struggling with this, there's 2 areas I guess I see where people struggle. The first is they have a hard time keeping their knees soft at all times. And so what I mean by that is you want your knees to be in a position to where they're slightly bent and you can push your hips back, and the bend of my knee never changes throughout the range of motion. For most athletes, they're either gonna do one of two things. They're gonna completely lock their knees out, which means their body is perceiving them as falling forward, and this is to prevent them from falling forward, and then your back is going to round, it's gonna look ugly. The next thing that's gonna happen is if athletes are not able to load their posterior chain adequately or maintain that hinge, they're just gonna continue to bend their knees and they're gonna squat the weight, and that's gonna give them more quads, less posterior chain work, and that's gonna basically make a top half of a conventional deadlift. That's not what we want. So here are gonna be the ways that I recommend that we address this. The first, like I mentioned, as you probably heard me say earlier, is press through the insides of your feet. I know that's probably contrary to what you've probably heard, but pressing through pronation, or the inside part of our foot, is gonna allow us to access more internal rotation, and that's gonna open up the backside, which is then going to let us push our hips backward to create the space to be able to perform our RDL. If I go out like this, I'm gonna really over exaggerate, but if I'm gonna really go to the outside part of my feet, I'm already feeling this in my back and I'm basically done here. I can't go any further because I've reached out all of my space in my backside. So press the inside part of your feet first. The other thing you can do is you take a small object and you can place it between the upper thighs, and that's gonna automatically create adduction. And by creating adduction, that's gonna open up the backside part of our space, and then we can actually learn to hinge that way. And that's another way to help give some coaching cues. The other final thing that I'm gonna recommend from a coaching perspective is don't teach them chest up. This cue I've found, especially with my athletes, if we're teaching chest up in the RDL, what happens is we go through this crazy extension pattern, and through extension, we run out of range of motion. We can't go anywhere if we're already at some place where we're trying to go. But if I can actually get my chest pulled down, my pelvis underneath me, I already feel this tone go away. Now it's easier for me to bend over because I can actually go to that position where if I'm here, I'm already stuck. I can't go any further than this right here because I'm already so far forward from my pelvis to my low back to my chest. Everything is forward and I can't get my hips back any further. And that usually causes a lot of issues with athletes, and they get frustrated because they get told chest up, extend, push your butt back, and they're wondering why their hinge can't go anywhere. Loosen up, keep everything stacked, knees soft, chest tall, but not stuck out, just chest tall, and butt goes back, and they'll be able to access those ranges of motion. All right, that's gonna wrap up our video today on the Romanian deadlift. Hopefully you happen to take something away from this video to help you either as a coach or an athlete to improving your RDL and your hinging technique. Again, I can't stress this enough. You don't have to be married to the barbell for this particular exercise. You can use dumbbells, bands, cables like in pull-throughs, 45-degree back extensions, all to train the hinging pattern. The barbell just happens to be a nice way to be able to load the pattern very effectively through a nice range of motion. As I talked about with the coaching cues, the big thing here is to make sure you're not overextending your athletes through extension-based patterns to get them to hinge well. I think you'll find if you just tell them chest proud, keep their hips underneath them, find the inside part of their feet, their hinge pattern is probably immediately going to improve, and you're gonna have to deal with less headaches. If you're using this exercise to develop your glutes and your hamstrings, just make sure you're training it smartly, intelligently, and using rep ranges that work really well for you. Usually that's probably gonna be 3 to 5 sets of 6 to 12 reps. And that's probably gonna be a sweet spot to build some quality mass in those areas, and then you're gonna be able to use them to help with your deadlifts, your squats, or overall hypertrophy gain. Again, if you happen to like this video, do me a favor, smash that like button, leave me a comment, let me know, did you take one coaching tip away from this in terms of how I help athletes and clients every single day with their hinge technique. I know personally when I was helping athletes learn how to hinge, these are things that I would have really appreciated to know, and it would have saved me many of minutes of every single client teaching them to hinge, because I was initially taught extension, chest proud, stick your butt out, and I was always having issues with that. But finding the inside part of the feet and keeping everything stacked has really helped me clean up how I teach the hinge to multiple young athletes and experienced gym goers. So again, if you like this video, smash the like button, share it with a friend that might need help with their hinging, or maybe just share it with somebody that you happen to know that really would benefit from this video. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks again, and I'll see you at the next video.